half of what we expected. It's a pretty good group, so we're going to get started. Welcome, everyone, and thanks for joining. I'm Dave Lamson, National Sales Manager for NCSI, and your moderator for today's session. In just a minute, I'm going to turn you over to Brian Hodzik, Senior Network Engineer and CTO for NCSI. Since you joined us for LANDesk training today, you know that NCSI is a Platinum LANDesk partner, and last year we were named LANDesk Partner of the Year. The award was in part based on the value-add services we provide to the customers, like these periodic trainings. But LANDesk is one of only several products we represent. The same value-added services we provide for LANDesk are extended to all of our major products. And as you can see on the slide in front of you, those include HP for server storage and networking. If you haven't discussed HP 3PAR and converged infrastructure with your NCSI account executive, you'll definitely be contacted soon. Palo Alto Networks for next-generation firewalls, threat prevention and application control. eVault for on-premise and cloud-based disk-to-disk backup, including the ability to host your systems in an eVault data center in the event of a disaster. VMware for industry-leading virtualization. WebSense for web data and email security, and Citrix for application desktop delivery, including mobile device management. And Digital Persona for biometric identity solutions and single sign-on. For those of you familiar with our product trainings, you'll know that in the past we've typically provided these sessions on site in 3 to 4 cities each quarter. As our product mix and customer base have expanded, it's become increasingly difficult for us to maintain the frequency of these trainings. As a result, we've decided to focus on instructor-led online training to reach a wider audience. In upcoming weeks, you'll receive similar invitations to webinars on the products on this slide. Some will be trainings, some will be more sales-oriented, but we'll definitely identify which will be which on the invites as we send them out. We'll also post the information on our website as they get scheduled and the dates are finalized. Before I turn it over to Brian, a quick reminder on the ground rules. Due to the size of the audience, everyone will be on mute for the duration of the training. Please use the chat window for any questions or comments. Thanks again, and with that, turn it over to Brian.
Thanks, Dave. Like Dave said, my name is Brian Hodzik, Senior Network Engineer and CTO here with NCSI. I'll be leading the discussion here today. I'll try and keep an eye on the question section, so please, if you have anything as we go along, please type it into that question box since everyone's on mute, and I'll try and wrap up with the end with a kind of an open Q&A if anyone has questions at that point as well. All right, so today we're talking about LANDesk. We want to kind of split up into 2 halves. Let's first talk about what's new in LANDesk 9.5 Service Pack 2, and then let's delve into some software distribution training. When we talk to our customers, everyone always tells us they wish they could get more out of the product. You know, as everyone knows, LANDesk is a very broad product. There's a lot of different things, and so we're trying to focus these trainings on saying, well, let's not try and do everything. Let's try and focus on one thing, you know, right in the beginning, and really kind of expand upon it with more than just what you would read in the manual. So we picked software distribution this time. We're always open for feedback. We want to do these on a very periodic interval, so please, you know, give us feedback. If you want it to be operating system deployment, you want to know about provisioning, you know, you want to know about software license monitoring, please give us feedback on what you would want to hear more about. We'll try and keep you abreast of new changes, new products in the LANDesk family, as well as let's, you know, get you trained up on your existing products that you own today. Probably noticed this if you've hit LANDesk's webpage recently. They did recently change their logo. For those of you who've been using LANDesk for a long time with the uppercase L-A-N-D, now they're going to be all uppercase characters. So that'll only take me 5 years to try and remember when I'm typing out an emails to use LANDesk in all uppercase. So let's talk about Service Pack 2. It was released last month. It's available on the LANDesk community website. If you haven't been there before, it's one of the best places to get information about LANDesk. It is kind of a combination of just if you're having any issues with that, just talk to your account manager, and they should be able to help you out with making sure it's associated with your account so you have the rights to download it. So know that that's a little bit different from years past where pretty much anyone could download it. When you get to that download page, you're going to notice 3 separate downloads that it wants to talk about. So first of all, there's the core server patch, then there's the remote console patch, then there's the client patch. So what do you do with these and where do you put them? So the core server patch goes just like it sounds, on the core server directly. When you install that on the core server, you're actually going to be patching the core files itself, you're going to be patching the console on the core, and you're going to be patching the agent install files on the core. So as you notice with the second file, the remote console patch, that you go and install on like maybe your workstation. If you have the LANDesk console installed on your local machine, you would install this remote console patch for it. You don't need to go back and take that patch and put it on the core. You only need to run that first patch on the core to make it happen. Next, we have the client patch. These are it's the actual executables and files associated with patching your clients out on all your workstations. We'll talk about the best way to deal with that, but if you need a standalone version of it, you can grab it right there. Again, you do not need to apply this to the core server because the core server patch includes all of that. If you own LANDesk Data Analytics, grab this next link, either if it's regular LANDesk Data Analytics or LANDesk Data Analytics for SCCM. That's just a new install for Service Pack 2. If you run LANDesk Mobility Manager, it's relatively unchanged. You don't need to do anything as it relates to Service Pack 2. If you're not familiar with what the changes happen with Mobility Manager, it relies heavily on a cloud-based platform now. So when there's big changes and updates and things like that, it usually happens off-site in the cloud, and your local implementation doesn't need to change much. That was done to help speed up when new operating systems and so forth come out for mobile devices. We don't have to worry about revamping our entire internal infrastructure to accommodate that. We can, we can do it much more quickly. Just like every service pack, it's not perfect. We've had several implementations of it so far. Customers have been giving us almost all good feedback. We have had 1 or 2 kind of small issues with particular implementations. I'm not incredibly worried about the service pack as a whole, though, because most people are coming back and saying it's a good success. I would encourage you to reach out to us if you're having any hesitations or you have a particular situation that you're concerned about as it relates to Service Pack 2. So please just reach out to us if you need some help diagramming how it would work or the impact on your different machines. Please let us know. So let's go through the mechanics of installing it. So the installation of the actual patch itself is not particularly difficult. You simply install the files on the core server, you run through the installer, and it asks for a reboot through the installer, and it asks for a reboot. If you have remote consoles, you have the LANDesk console on your local workstation, you also need to install that second file that we talked about on the previous slide that is the console, the remote console patch. So just run that on your machine, reboot, and then you're able to get into the console. Now, first and foremost, agents are backwards compatible. So don't feel like you're in a rush. And this is not just with Service Pack 2. This has been with every previous version of LANDesk for many, many years. The agents are backwards compatible. So you can get your core up to 9.5 Service Pack 2. Don't feel like it's an emergency to get out the agent for 9.5 Service Pack 2 out to all your individual client workstations. Since it's backwards compatible, the only thing that you're going to miss out on is any new features or any new bug fixes. If they fix some particular bug or there's some fancy new feature that you're looking for, we may not get that kind of functionality, but we're still going to be able to remote control and patch and push out software to your 9.5, 9.0, 8.8. We go quite a ways back in terms of backwards compatibility with our versions. So I'd still encourage you to get your agents up to the latest version, but don't feel like that's the most important thing you need to do right after rebooting, after you upgrade your core. So how do we get our agents up to date? There's a couple of different methods. First of all, we apply the patch to the core server for its install directory. So if you're going out and running it from wscfg32.exe, or you're doing it as part of an OSD job, something like that, those agents will automatically be up to the latest version. So all you need to do is install it as normal, and they will have SP2 kind of right built into it. If you have standalone self-contained executables, then that's how you install your agents. Those are now out of date because those are kind of a one-time thing you created, and then it's a static version of that agent, when you upgrade on the core, those are not affected. So I would go and erase those and just simply recreate them. Just right-click on the agent and say create a self-contained client executable. There's also a button inside the agent configuration that says Rebuild All. It's not a bad idea to go in there and click that. The Rebuild All essentially goes, and if there's any new tweaks or so forth to the agent, it makes sure it applies all of those tweaks to the agent configurations that you have. So it's called Rebuild All. Looks like a little gear, I think. Lastly, you can have LANDesk patch itself. So remember, LANDesk has a extremely robust patch management product. We can patch your Java and your Adobe and your Office and your Windows. Why can't LANDesk patch itself? Well, it can. Kind of make note of this particular LANDesk community article. It's 24384, and it will give you the ability to essentially to have a downloaded install for Service Pack 2, import it into your LANDesk patch management system, and use its own detection logic, and you can do things like autofix to get your patches out there. I see a couple of questions. We have one that says, what are the issues that you've seen with Service Pack 2? We have one particular customer that has a pretty large implementation, I think 4 core servers, 25,000 nodes, something like that. With their particular implementation, we had a database problem. They have specifically stated that it was almost certainly because of the custom nature of the way that their setup was. Every other customer we've run it on, we haven't had issues with going directly with applying Service Pack 2. The second question is, can Service Pack 1 be skipped and go directly to Service Pack 2? I actually don't know the answer to that off the top of my head. So what we're going to do is research that. We may have an answer before the end of the call. Or I'll send out an updated email to everyone that attended with an answer to that question. My guess is that, yes, it can, but I don't want to jump to conclusions for that's a relatively big deal if I'm wrong on that. So I'll find that out. Okay, so let's talk about new features that are included. They've made some tweaks to the agent behaviors, temp, and DB files. That's a pretty obscure change that probably not too many people really need to worry about. Antivirus, if you do run LANDesk antivirus, this is kind of important. It gives us the ability to say, should we apply Kaspersky AV patches when we do a pattern file update? It's actually turned off by default because you don't necessarily want to have that turned on. So, kind of keep that in mind that it's off by default. If you want to turn that on, you just have to go and enable it. The one in red here under inventory is a pretty big deal. Previously, we were having some issues on determining what is a laptop and what is a tablet. It used to be easy, a laptop was a laptop and an iPad was a tablet. Well, we're kind of perverting the difference between those two with these Surface tablets and things like that are half tablet and half laptop. So they're just going to change the distinction. We're just going to call it portable. So that way we don't have to be wrong half the time on whatever the devices are. We're just going to call it a portable type. Windows 8.1 support in LANDesk Patch Manager. Quite a few options on this. I really just went and got this information off of the LANDesk community page, the README associated with Service Pack 2. I don't want to bore you with every last little detail in here. Please go and read that. Read me if you want to know all the individual details. I'll kind of tell you the highlighted things that I think are interesting. There is a single sign-on capability to HTML remote control. For those of you that don't know what the HTML remote control is it's LANDesk's vision for the future. So LANDesk kind of has a long-term idea that we may stop using as much specific, Windows-based applications in the future. So rather than turn it over kind of in one day, they're going to kind of slowly plug away at individual features, and this is an HTML, a remote control is a good one to start with. So in 9.5, they introduced the ability to have the remote controller, so you as a help desk engineer or something like that, be able to remote control someone with an HTML5-based agent. So, geez, you can do it from your Mac, from your PC, from your iPad. You can just open up an HTML web page and be able to remote control them. Eventually, we're going to probably see everything go into HTML5 based. There is currently a web console today. My personal opinion is it's not that great. It's always better to use the FAT console. It's faster, better, but we're going to slowly see it migrate over to HTML5 because that provides a much more rich interface. I mean, look, we can do remote control. That proves how good HTML5 can be for us. So previously, when you were in the console and you right-clicked and said HTML5 remote control, went and opened up a web browser and then asked for a username and password. So it stunk that you had to, even though you're already authenticated to the LANDesk console, you had to authenticate again into the web-based interface to prove that you had the right authority to be able to remote control. Now it does single sign-on. You right-click, you say HTML5-based remote control, it automatically logs into to the next step. Another thing that I find interesting is the remote control service client recovery on failure. Everybody knows that there is there's a service running on the workstation for remote control, and it runs an executable. If that executable ever dies, there was really nothing that we did about that. We just kind of said, whoops, well, that stinks. Now we've turned on by default the recovery mechanism. So inside of Windows services, you can say if this service ever dies, automatically kick off a restart. Now that's just turned on by default. You had to go and manually do that before. Now it's enabled by default. Question, what ports does LANDesk 9.5 SP2 use for web-based remote control? I will, at the end, kind of pull up a link that describes all the ports that LANDesk uses. They have this very nice page that shows every individual port. So off the top of my head, I don't know it, but when I get to the demonstration section, I can also fire off an HTML remote control. It's very easy to see it at the top of the web page. It is secured with SSL, but it's not running on the standard port 443. So when we get to the section of showing it off, I can kind of show you what that looks like. Much more information about SLM. Again, I don't want to bore you with all the individual details. Go to the LANDesk community website. Go to the Service Pack 2 downloads. There's a README. This has all the individual details of what features are added, as well as something I did include in here was, a list of, geez, got to be 200 bug fixes that they included in it. So you can scour through that if you're having particular issues with something before. They would tell you more about what bug fixes are included. OS support. We added several operating systems. Windows 8 Professional and Enterprise 64-bit. Notice that LANDesk Antivirus is not supported in that. We added Macintosh OS X 10.9, and we added Windows Server 2012 R2. Notice that we don't support AV on those platforms just as of yet as well. Notice that this is only for clients, not for the server. So 2012 is currently still not supported to run your LANDesk core server on. However, that is on the roadmap. So the next version of LANDesk we get, if that's going to be 9.6, 10.0, 13, whatever they decide to call it, it's been slated to run on server 2012. So know that that is in the future, but we'll probably have to have a full release of that. We're probably not going to get it in the service pack. Removed OS support 10.6.8. Mac OS is now removed from normal support and is included only as a legacy agent. What is a legacy agent? It is essentially an agent built on an older version of the core. So currently, the files that exist on your 9.5 SP2 core will not work on 10.6.8 and other platforms that are considered legacy. But what you can do is you can build an older core that's like a 9.5 SP1 or 9.5 SP0 or 9.0. It all depends on what legacy we need to get. We build up an agent, we put in the certificate, we correct the name, and that will still be backwards compatible. Since the agent's backwards compatible, it'll still work for the time being. They don't provide a huge amount of support for legacy agents, so if something's not going to work, there's unfortunately not much we can do about it, but we still will be able to get the basic functionality out of those legacy agents. Mark Carpenter says that the HTML port is 4343. That definitely rings a bell, so I bet that's exactly what it is. So that's the port for HTML5-based remote control. And that's going from the remote controller to the remote control E, so the end machine needs to have that 4343 port opened inbound for that remote control to work. Okay, so that's the kind of what's new in Service Pack 2 that we have so far. It's not the heaviest footprint of a Service Pack we've had. SP1 was a little bit bigger, had more features and so forth. but they were kind of focusing on Service Pack 2 being mostly a bug fix oriented Service Pack. So kind of keep that in mind. Next, I want to kind of jump over to our software distribution training. For those of you that are on the line, I know most of you, some of you are, amateurs when it comes to software distribution, and maybe you've never even done it inside of LANDesk. Other of you are pros and could probably teach me a thing or two about software distribution. So please chime in if you have any comments with what I'm describing. But I bet even if you're the hardened pro, I could still teach you a trick or two as it relates to software distribution. If you like what you see today, please keep in mind that we want feedback. We want people to tell us what they want for our next session that'll come out on what training you'd like to see. So let's talk about LANDesk software distribution. First of all, it's broken into two halves. We have distribution packages. That's the what. Think Office, Adobe Acrobat, Chrome. What application do you want to install? We have the delivery method. That's how. How are we going to get the components from from the server to the workstation? So we're going to break it up into those two major halves, and we're going to talk about those quite in depth. In terms of what packages we can push out, we have a whole host of applications, MSIs, EXEs, batch files, Macintosh DMG or IMG files, VB scripting host files, PowerShell files, application virtualization packages. So there's a whole host of different things we can do to different kind of application sources that we can use to push out. Let's kind of expand upon what those are and the best way to use them. Software distribution, I like to say, is a little bit more art than it is science. It takes a little bit of experience using it to kind of know that, well, not everything is exactly the same. There's more than one way to skin a cat, and so don't feel like you're always going to use the same methodology when it comes to pushing out software applications. Just know that there's many different ways to do it. So I'm going to give you some examples today to use, and when you're going to actually pick your particular application, it might not be the exact way that we're doing it here today. Everyone requires a little bit of tweaking. What works for one install, if you got it working great for Office 2010, we go over to something else. You want to push out Adobe Acrobat, it may be a completely different method. So keep that in mind. So this is my kind of system that I've evolved over the years of doing LANDesk implementation for many, many years. Everyone will have a different take on it. You talk to a LANDesk employee, they might say something a little bit different. This comes from what I argue is kind of real-world experience. This isn't just lab-oriented that, well, in a theoretical situation it would work this way. No, I've pushed out many, many different applications, very tough ones when customers can't figure it out. This is my method for getting it figured out. Okay, step one, plagiarize. Do not try and reinvent the wheel. You are not the first person to try and push out a piece of software. Think about it. Whenever someone comes to me and says, oh, well, you can't push out this piece of software. It just doesn't work that way. We have to manually install it. I always tell them, well, what kind of software is it? If there was, some mom and pop shop and only 3 people in the world run it, okay, I believe you. If it's something large, if it's a major application out there, imagine these big organizations. So you have 100,000 plus computers. Do you really think that someone's running around to all those machines and installing things by hand? No, they've absolutely configured it to remotely push out that software. So know that there's always a way to, almost always a way to automate these tasks. So first of all, go and search the internet. When we're searching, try and leave LANDesk out of it for the time being. Don't say, how do I automate Adobe Acrobat Reader distribution in LANDesk? Leave the LANDesk part off of it, because we're going to use similar techniques to other vendors, Microsoft SCCM or Altiris or Case. If you leave the LANDesk part off of it, you're going to get better results, because we can use what they're doing. If they say, oh, you just need to run this executable with this XYZ command line parameter, we can use that same method when it comes to LANDesk. So leave LANDesk out of it. Just simply search for things like, how do I make a silent install for Adobe Reader, and go down that path. There's a website called appdeploy.com. Oh, I missed an O in there. That's supposed to be appdeploy.com. It is a website of, it's kind of like a catalog of people doing this same kind of idea. I want to be able to silently push out software. how do I do it? You know, and someone says, oh, well, I had success with running XYZ, or here's the MSI, or you get this tool, and they post on there, and they give feedback, and people say, oh, yeah, this worked for me or didn't work for me. So the app deploy is a great, easy shortcut to get to it. Joe Beatty points out that it actually redirects now to itninja.com. That a company purchased it. It was actually Dell purchased it and renamed it. I always go to the old URL of appdeploy.com. It's easier to remember, and it redirects you over there. But this IT Ninja site is the same thing. It's just a catalog of applications that you're able to push out to, and people have had experience with before. So thanks, Joe. Okay, so lastly, number 4, the vendor website. So if any of these are applications that are pretty large, think Microsoft, think Adobe, think these big vendors, they're having their customers ask them, how do I automate the implementation of this software? How do I push it out? So very likely they might have some documentation on their website that says how you do it, or what the command line parameters or common methods for doing it. So make sure to hit their website as well. Okay, so here's my personal order of how I would choose to push out a piece of software. So what's going to happen is you're going to have a piece of software, and exes and batch files and PowerShell and all this stuff. How in the world do you know which one to use? So this is my kind of order. And if you don't take anything away from the training, just pay attention to this one kind of a page, because it can save you quite a bit of grief down the line. So first of all, I think the best tool is a vendor tool. There's several examples of that. Adobe Customization Wizard can customize Adobe Acrobat and Reader installs. Microsoft has the Office Customization Utility. When it comes from the vendor, it's going to be extremely robust. It's going to be supported by them. It's going to have every last little option in the world that you can imagine. So vendor tool is the best and first place that I should check. And again, don't just check the vendor website first. Check Google first, because oftentimes you'll be able to find it easier with other people referencing that particular vendor tool. The second is an MSI. If you're not familiar with MSIs, that's the Microsoft installer format. A good chunk of installers come this way today. The MSI is great because it has the ability, it's built in to make it silent. It's built in to support multiple operating systems. This installer can work on XP and 2000 and Windows 7 and Windows Vista, even 64 and 32-bit sometimes. It has a built-in uninstaller. There's lots of really good reasons to use an MSI. So if you can find an MSI, great, let's run with it. The third option is an executable with a command line. So a good example of this is people that are pushing out to multiple platforms, like Firefox. They will want to give it as an executable. There's oftentimes just a command line switch. We just put a -ms switch on the end, and we can make Firefox silent. Now, here's where you start to need to do a little bit of sleuthing. Oftentimes, a vendor will say, well, here's our installer. It's a 500 megabyte exe, and that's all you need, right? Well, go grab 7-zip or go grab WinRAR and have that on your system when you're dealing with these kinds of packages. Right-click on it and see if in the context menu it allows you to extract that executable. 9 times out of 10, it's not really just an executable. What they've done is they've taken their MSI and all of the associated files needed to install that MSI, and they've combined them together into a executable that's just a self-extracting executable. So you can just right-click on that exe and explode that file out there to see the the MSI on the inside, and then obviously that's the easiest for us to push out. So grab 7-zip, right-click, look to see if it can be extracted. Geez, you'd be surprised how many times that works. Next is a batch file. This comes in handy if you're running multiple tasks. What if you need to install Firefox? Then you need to install a plugin. Then you need to update a particular file. You might need to do many steps as part of that. A batch file is an easy way to have a multi-step process associated with an install. Next, we have repackaging with Admin Studio. We'll go into this a little bit further later on, but this is the ability to take an installer, I don't care if it's an exe, batch file, whatever, and turn it into an MSI. This is, I don't want to say this is the last resort, but this is, towards the bottom. I don't want to do this with every package. I don't want to start with this. I want this to be just like it looks. This is number 5 on the list of order. I go through the top 4 first, and then come down to Admin Studio. And I'll tell you kind of how that works a little bit later. And lastly, conceive, beat, and install it by hand. This rarely happens. I can't tell you, I can count on one hand how many times I've had to give up and not be able to push out a an application. And that is not a challenge for you guys to then email me afterwards and say, hey, try and, I bet this one will stump you. I'd be more than happy to help, but I don't think I can handle that many requests. Okay, so let's look at a vendor tool. This example vendor tool is the Adobe customization tool. A lot of people want to push out Adobe Reader, and they want to make it silent, and they want to configure it their way. Well, this little tool I just download for free from Adobe's website, point it at the Adobe installer, and it creates a transform file for me. I'll show you what that looks like next, but essentially it's an answer file. I can do things like, look, suppress the EULA. I don't want the EULA to be popping up. Let's go ahead and acknowledge that on behalf of the end user. I can turn off updates, so Adobe updates aren't trying to rattle off all the time and annoy the user, and maybe they don't even have admin rights to run it. Shortcuts. I hate the desktop shortcut for Adobe Acrobat. Who in the world ever clicks on that and then says File, Open, PDF? No, everyone goes to the file and double clicks on it. So I like to go through here and tweak those kind of changes, spits out an MSP file, and then we can use that as part of our installation. We have the Office customization tool. This is in 2010. It's built right into the installer. So all you have to do is run setup.exe/admin, and it will run this customization tool for us. We can put in our product keys. We can say install Word, but don't install Excel. We can create shortcuts. This one's extremely robust. Has a million different options that you can choose for how you want to tweak your installs. One thing to keep in mind, though, is it's only available on volume license versions, so things like Professional Plus or Enterprise. You can't go down to Best Buy and buy a copy of Office and run the customization wizard. I have had struggles with that in the past. Of you run it setup.exe/admin, and it just doesn't work. It doesn't usually provide you any feedback or anything. So note you need the volume license versions to be able to do this. Okay, so command line. We're past the vendor tool. Let's talk about kind of command line oriented installs. Let's use an example of Firefox. A tiny bit of Googling will let you find that this is right on the wiki on Mozilla's webpage. So it's right from the vendor website. Tells us that you just simply run the path to the executable -ms, and that makes a silent installation file. So it's as simple as that. Now, not everyone's going to have this -s. Some people, or this is -ms. Some people do -s, uppercase S, /s. Everyone does it a little bit differently. An easy way to kind of sleuth it out, just in case we don't have a lot of feedback on the vendor website, is to run the command by hand with a /?. So I'll run firefox.exe /?. Sometimes it'll pop up and say, oh, well, here are the command line parameters for the install. Which one do you want? And it'll tell you, oh, silent is -s. Not every application works that way, but sometimes it proves useful. Okay, so Admin Studio. Let's talk about that. Admin Studio is given to you for free. Since you own LANDesk, you own a limited version of Admin Studio. You don't own the full thing. The full Admin Studio suite is an extremely expensive package. And to tell you the truth, we don't need all of those features. We only need the ones that are provided to us with the Admin Studio Lite edition. So take a look at this LANDesk community article 22827 for more information about how to download the LANDesk version of Admin Studio. It provides a link for you to go grab that. So first of all, what I like to do is use it inside of a virtual machine. So I use VMware Workstation, use whatever kind of virtualization product you like. I like it because it has the ability to create snapshots. When we get into the repackager, we want to always have a clean environment that we're using to build these packages from. So doing it in a VM always provides that clean environment. I can create a clean machine, take a snapshot, install it in the studio, and it's ready to go. I can revert to that clean snapshot in a moment's notice. Makes it very, very easy for me. We have two options inside of Admin Studio. You're going to do one of two paths. First is the repackager. That's the concept of taking an executable, batch file, whatever installer the vendor gives you. We are going to do a before and after scan. We're going to scan the machine before it. You're going to go and run the installer. Then we're going to scan it afterwards, and every file and registry entry that we see, we're going to bundle up inside of an MSI. What's great is that it is pretty easy. You just, next your way through the wizard. It's not incredibly difficult. You can do multiple steps if you want to go install Firefox and then go and set the home page and then, install Flash, whatever you want. You can do all of that. and it spits out as an MSI. The drawbacks to it are it is theoretically operating system specific, meaning if you create a package on Windows 7, you're supposed to only deploy that to Windows 7. You're supposed to create a different one on Windows XP, different one on Windows Vista. I bend the rules. You know, most of the time you can get away with it, no problem, having it built on XP but ran on Windows 7. But you know, you should follow the official rules if you're ever having issues with troubleshooting. You're never supposed to repackage an MSI, and this goes back to a couple of slides ago when I said, hey, go get 7-zip and try and extract the executable. Oftentimes, people will try and repackage an EXE. Turns out it was just an MSI on the inside. So, repackaging the MSI is not the end of the world, but it's definitely less than ideal. I always equate it to taking a photocopy of a photocopy. It's going to start to get worse and degrade over time and be less resilient to upgrades and things like that. So it's something that you probably shouldn't do. Next, we have the tuner. That's the ability to tweak the existing MSI. Let's say you want to do Office or something like that, and there's those features that says which, when you go through and install and then you choose the custom, and it lists the 10 different components, and some of them are set to install, some are set to do not install, you can go into the tuner and create an answer file and say, oh no, I want this option installed, but that option not installed. So you can kind of tweak and add certain features. A couple of questions. Can the repackager be used for uninstall as well? Theoretically, yes. In practice, I don't like it. I'll show you the better way to uninstall later. So stick around and we'll talk about that in the end. And unique builds for 32-bit and 64-bit, yes. When you're creating packages with the repackager, you need to have separate 32 and 64-bit builds. Again, that is the letter of the law. You read the documentation, you read advice. That's what they tell you to do. Can you get away with it? Usually, you can get away with a 64-bit package or a 32-bit package working on a 64-bit machine, but usually not the opposite of that. If it's 64-bit binaries that they put on the machine, those won't be able to run on a 32-bit machine. So the best practice is, yes, separate builds and not try and cheat, even though cheating sometimes works with the 32, 64-bit. Okay, so here's where we get into a little bit more of the mechanics of pushing it out, a little less theoretical, a little bit more practical, what you're going to see in your console. So when you right-click and say New Distribution Package, here's kind of the screen that comes up. We put the name at the top, we put in a description, and we point to the primary file. You can see the primary file right there says, this is the root installer. If it's an EXE, we point at the main EXE. If it's an MSI, we point at the main MSI. And we reference that individual file kind of on this first page right here. Something interesting happens when we point to it. We create a package hash associated with that particular file. We do that because when we get into our distribution of that particular file, we don't want it to ever come across corrupt. We want to know if there's a corrupt file. So we take a hash of it, we compare the hash on the other side to make sure that it wasn't corrupted as it was brought across. If you ever go and replace your executable, you need to come back into here. It's not in this menu, but you can right-click on the package and say Reset Package Hash. It's a very, very useful tool to essentially say, hey, clear out all the hashes, reset them to what they are, reread those files, and recreate the hashes. You can almost never do it too often. Whenever you're having problems with software distribution, go back and reset the package hash for that. That's the first troubleshooting step I always do to make sure that I didn't swap out a file and it's got the wrong hash at this time. This is the install-uninstall options. Now, when you're using an MSI, you'll start to see the beauty of it because this page lights up. Look at all the options we have. We have an install. We have an uninstall. That's why I said the MSIs are great because they have built-in uninstallers. We can say the level that we're going to show the end users. It could be quiet, it could be verbose, or we're going to make it completely silent, whatever. MSIs are great because all of this is built into it, and we just need to change the radio button or check a box to have it behave the way that we want it to. Notice down there at the bottom we have a command line section to tweak it kind of further. And I even put in a sample of what you would do with your MST file that you would spit out from that sample Adobe customization tool. It's going to create something called acroread.mst. Here's how we apply that. We point to the Adobe Acrobat or Adobe Reader MSI, and we put the command line here called transforms equals and then the transform file. This makes it so it's not just installing the generic MSI, it's the generic MSI plus our settings on top of that. Additional files, well, not everything is one single executable that installs everything or a single MSI that contains all the files. Sometimes it's an MSI plus a bunch of files. So what we need to do is we need to go and point to that location where those additional files are and add them to the right. So on the right-hand side there, you can see additional files. There's a bunch of Office files associated with this. I've added all of them across. We'll talk about the path and where that exists kind of here in a minute. If we create an uninstall associated with the package, we can actually have it linked between the two so that the installer knows about the uninstaller. The logic behind that is maybe what if you want to push out based on Active Directory group membership or Active Directory OU location. You could say things like, when a user is added to this particular group, install this application. Then keep track of that user. If the user is ever removed from that group, then actually run this particular uninstall. So we can uninstall if a user is removed from a group. And so that makes it so that you can kind of link the two, and it's not a one-time thing. If they're removed from the group, it would be automatically removed. There's a question, where's the option to put administrative account? Oh, I'm going to get to that here in a minute, so hang on. Oh, it's the next slide. What a perfectly timed question. So the default says to run as the local system account. The local system account is great because it is always has admin rights. It doesn't have like UAC issues, and it works even if the user's not logged in. Well, the current user's account sometimes is beneficial if you're running like an action against their profile or something that's user-specific. But if the user doesn't have rights, if the user's not logged in, you're going to have some failure. We have this new option that's run as a specified user. This is pretty handy. If for whatever reason the system account is not good enough, you can run it as a particular domain account. I can go in and say, you know, hey, this admin account, this local administrator account, I want to run this particular install as. Joshua has a question, what groups are you talking about? You can deploy things based on anything that we point to in the directory manager. So for example, you go into the directory manager and you point at your Active Directory or eDirectory or whatever, and we can enumerate those groups. So you could actually point to an Active Directory user group and say, push out this particular piece of software to that particular group. So a lot of people like to use Active Directory as kind of the end-all, be-all location of all information in their network. Well, you could have LANDesk be the enforcement of that pushing out application, but when you wanted a user to receive a piece of software, you would go into Active Directory and add them to the group called accounting. And we know that we've targeted the accounting group for that particular application install. Not a requirement. Not too many people in LANDesk use that, to tell you the truth, but I think it's pretty powerful, and I wish more people would, you know, at least look into it. Okay, dependent packages is if you needed to have something installed first. What if you need to put .NET before you install this particular application? You would create a .NET package, point to it in the dependent packages, and then that would be automatically laid down first, and then our application would be installed. Prerequisites is actually a way to prevent the application being installed. So let's say you have Office 2013. Do you really want to do all the work of copying all those files down there to a Windows XP machine just to realize that we can't install it? Or what about a 64-bit installer? Do you really want to copy all those files down to a 32-bit machine just for the installer to run and fail? Prerequisites is the way you can create a query to stop it from working. I know it sounds counterintuitive, but you're actually preventing it from working by using a prerequisite. If you want it to run on everyone, don't change anything. Leave this default. But if you want to say, hey, I only want this to install on Windows XP machines, create a query. That query group only includes XP. Now it will only install on XP machines. Even if we attempt to push it out, it'll kind of come back and say, nope, it failed the prerequisite query. Assigning the return codes. The return code is when you execute an application, it will do its process, and when it is finished, it returns back to the originating application a number. Everything other than a 0 was traditionally kind of a failure. You know, if it came back with return code 47, you know, we had to go look up what 47 was, but it was probably a failure. 0 was usually the only acceptable ones. Well, times are kind of changing a little bit. Almost probably the reason they added this is, I think it was Office 2010, maybe it was 2007. One of the two came back with a return code of, don't quote me on this, but it was like 1720. And 1720 meant the installer succeeded, however, a reboot is now required. When we originally were pushing out with LANDesk, when we couldn't interpret that return code correctly, we would show as a failure even though we know it was actually installed. So with changing the return codes, you can say things like 1720 is a success, or this particular application returns a code of 43 and that's good or bad. You can map those return codes to good outcomes or bad outcomes. So that's the return code mapping. Okay, so where do I put these files? I have an installer for Office. Where on earth do I put it? Well, first of all, I don't care where you put it. You can put it on your LANDesk server. You can put it on your own file server. You can put it on a preferred server. A preferred server is like a file server out at a physical location in case you have a WAN connection. I really don't care where you store them, as long as you do it one of two methods, and that's below, HTTP or UNC. So HTTP is beneficial because it's anonymous, doesn't require any privileges, and as long as you turn directory browsing on, that's practically it in order to enable HTTP. It's very, very reliable. UNC has the potential of being faster and has the potential of being a little bit more ubiquitous. However, we sometimes run into share permissions. For example, a couple of slides ago, you heard me talk about the user account that we run it as. Well, the default account we run it as is local system. The local system account is the computer account for that particular machine. When you go and create a share, the computer account does not have rights to that. The user may, but we're not running it as the user. We're running it as the computer account. So you would need to go in and add domain computers, the group called domain computers, to have rights to that particular share. Once you do that, we're kind of past the permissions problem, and it's great because you can do things like run from source. We don't have to download all the individual files. We can just run them from that UNC path. Preferred server gives us the ability to actually go and replicate that data between our locations. So if we have our core server and then we have a server out at a location across a slower WAN link, it would just replicate that share information. It needs to be the same, like I've described here, core name /apps / Office 2010. It would need to be the exact same site server /apps / Office 2010. And then we go into the preferred server configuration. We say, well, here, this particular set of IP addresses, I want you to report into this particular preferred server first. But just like it sounds a preferred, we still fall back to the core server if the preferred server is unavailable. Okay, so delivery methods. Remember I said there was two kind of halves to it, the how, the what and the how. This is the how. We have four main delivery methods. We have push, we have policy supported push, we have multicast cache only. So push is us reaching out to the device and saying, hey dude, wake up, here's a package. It's great because it's, hey, I can start it right now. It's on demand or on a particular schedule. But if the machine is not available, it will fail, and it will just kind of fail outright, and that's the end of the conversation. A policy kind of is the opposite of that. We're waiting for them to call home to say, hey, are there any policies available? It's great because it's much, much more reliable in the long term. You're going to get a higher percentage because the machines that were off today, they'll probably go pick it up tomorrow. However, you get all excited and start the policy, and then nothing happens because you have to wait for them to call in. So it's a hurry up and wait kind of situation. Policy supported push is kind of a happy marriage of the two. Why don't we push to everyone that's available right now and create a policy for everyone that failed? It's the best of both worlds. There's very little drawback to using policy supported pushes. So if you're not sure what to do, I would steer you towards that. Multicast cache only is the ability to get the files out there without actually installing it. Got a big service pack coming up? It's on a weekend. You're a little nervous about getting it out in time during your maintenance window. Let's get the files out there first, and then we will install them at a later date. Because the first thing we always do when we go to install an application is check to whether the files exist in my local cache first. On the top there, you can see the different ways that we have to download. We can either use multicast, which, just like it sounds, instead of a single stream going out to a particular machine, it's more like a broadcast, sending it out to multiple machines at the same time. It's great because it's extremely efficient on the network, but it's not so great because it's slow. It's slow as tar sometimes because any member of the stream can ask for the stream to be slowed down. So we're kind of as slow as our slowest method. Next, we have run from source. This is great for UNC because you can actually, instead of looking at like Office 2010, there's 500 files in there. Instead of copying 500 files down and then going and kicking off the install, we just run it from that network share. If we don't need all those 500 files, we don't copy them down. So it's extremely fast, but it's got a high failure rate because if the permissions are not right, if the machine's not on, if there's a network interruption, it's not going to work. I love run from source for testing, but then when I get down to the real implementation of pushing it out, I often use the next one, which is download files. It's extremely reliable. Let's download them from the server to the end device. Let's use preferred server. Let's grab all the files and grab all the hashes, even if we're going to grab some redundant files. Next, we have pre-cache, just like it sounds. Get the files out there. Don't actually do the install. We have something kind of built into the system that LANDesk is not very good about showing you about. It's something called targeted multicast, and it's actually a patented technology that LANDesk has built into the system. This graphic right here describes it way better than I could usually do with waving my hands in the air when I'm usually trying to describe it to customers. So this is a good description of what exactly happens. Let's pretend I have 3 different locations. I have Tokyo, Salt Lake City, Swindon, and multiple locations, multiple segments per location. I want to push out a particular piece of software to everyone in the organization. What I'm going to do is I'm going to target everyone with that particular application. I'm going to, and when I say I'm going to, this all happens kind of on the back end. LANDesk is doing almost all of this automatically simply by checking the multicast box. It already knows everybody's IP address and their subnet mask, so we can easily decide who is in what we call the domain, a multicast domain. So we can already kind of recognize that. Then what we do is we elect something called a targeted multicast representative, or a multicast domain representative. And it's 1 machine per domain, and not Active Directory domain, more like multicast domain. And we're going to unicast it out to that particular machine. So we're going to take those files, we're going to send 4 copies of it across your WAN out to those individual machines. They're going to receive that, and they're going to simultaneously broadcast it out to their neighbors. So all their neighbors are going to receive that file from them, not from the core server. So that's where we get all of our bandwidth savings. But it's okay. Look, we have a couple of machines in the upper left in that segment H that were offline. If they come back on later, they power their machines back on, and they ask for that package, they actually have the ability to peer download it from one of their neighbors versus coming back from the core server. So it's going to grab it from their neighbor and send it across to those individual machines since they missed it. So it's kind of crazy, but all you need to do to turn that on is check the box that says use multicast. All the targeting and all of this kind of fancy stuff is done at the back end. We can change and tweak it a little bit, but for the most part, it is it's all automatic. Here in the delivery methods, you can tweak the bandwidth consumption. I love to go in here and do this to create a test delivery method that doesn't go slow. This is great for the real deal when you're pushing out to all your machines because it's nice and calm on the network. But when I'm testing, I don't want it to go slow. I want it to go as fast as possible. So I drag these all over to 100% and say, nope, go. I call it full throttle. That's the delivery method I usually create. Here under feedback and timing, you can control what the user sees. Is it going to be silent? Is it going to be verbose? Is it going to ask them, get the option to defer it to the next install, and all kinds of different crazy options. Me, I love hiding feedback from the end user. What they don't know can't hurt them, so I like to hide it. It all comes down to this. This is the end. We create a software distribution task. You go to Schedule Tasks, you right-click, and you say Create Software Distribution as a task. You're going to pick 2 things. You're going to pick a delivery method. You're going to click a distribution package that we've created. You drag your machines onto it, and you say Start Now, or Start Later, or Create as a policy, whatever we've said at that point. Okay, so troubleshooting. Troubleshooting is extremely important for software distribution because I'd love to say that it works first time, every time, no matter what. No, it is prone to failure, so you need to know how to troubleshoot it when it doesn't work. First of all, look at the log files on the core server. Core name, and then the LD log share, and then every single job that you create is going to create a scheduled task handler _ number, some kind of number that just increments up from 1. That's a very good place to start for looking for troubleshooting information. Secondly, on the end machine, look in the SDM cache to see if the files were copied down. Look in the data directory. This is all under the C program files LANDesk LD client directory. Go into the data subdirectory, look for sdclienttask.ldms.number. That will be the client-side log of that. Again, great troubleshooting information in there. If you're using download files, did the files get downloaded? If they're not there, that's a very good example of why it's not working. I like to run the installer on the device just like LANDesk runs it. So I'll actually open a command prompt. Maybe I'll even open a command prompt as a system account because, if I'm running it as a system, and I will execute it. If it's MSI exec or an EXE with command line switches, I'll run it and see what happens. Does it work? Does it fail? Does it pop up and say, hey, you need .NET first? If you run it very similar to the way LANDesk is doing it, we can then help troubleshoot a little bit better of why LANDesk would be failing. Uninstall. I kind of said earlier, there's a little bit of magic to the uninstall process. First of all, MSIs have built-in uninstallers. Just highlight the MSI, choose the radio button that's called MSI, or uninstall. It's as easy as that. If you don't have the installer, rather than using an MSI or the Admin Studio package builder to create an uninstaller, here's my preferred method. Take a look at the registry, go to HKey local machine, software, Microsoft, Windows, current version uninstall, and look for the uninstall string associated with that particular product. So in this case, it's Apple iTunes. There's the uninstall string. There's a couple of things you need to know about it. MSI-exec/I means look at the information of it. That's almost like a change when you're familiar with admin programs. That's change, not uninstall. Simply change that to an X. X means remove. That's just a standard MSI-exec parameter. So I could take this MSI-exec/I and then that big long string, simply change it to an X, put it in a batch file. All of a sudden I've created an uninstaller. I much prefer that over creating an uninstaller from the Admin Studio. This is just the tip of the iceberg. You can do 10,000 other things with software distribution. You can do the software distribution portal where the users get to choose. They get to go and pick from a list of applications they want to install. You can do the application virtualization so that the apps aren't really installed. They're just virtually there. And there's a LANDesk add-on that does that. LDAP-based distribution, I kind of talked about that a little bit, where we're pointing to Active Directory or some other kind of directory service for our targets. Instead of us dragging machines on manually, we're getting it from an external source. Provisioning. I have a lot of customers that use provisioning not just for operating system deployment, but actually to push out applications. It's complicated. What if I need to install this application, then reboot, then stop this service, then replace this registry key, then reboot, then install this? For a big, long, complex job like that, provisioning does really, really well because it can handle reboots really well. It can do all these different steps. So look into provisioning for something like that. If you want more information on advanced software distribution, just hit up your salesperson. They'll be able to get you in contact with me or one of our other engineers that would be able to help you create a more advanced software distribution job if that's what you're looking for. All right. So we're up to the Q&A. We're really running low on time, so bear with us for just another couple of minutes. We have a couple of questions out here. Let's see. Does multicast options require configuring switches and routers that allow to the rated those? Does the multicast option require configuring switches and routers to allow related traffic to other sites? No, and that's the great part about it. No network configuration is needed. The whole targeted multicast goes around your WAN. I don't care what your routers do. It doesn't matter. Your switches don't need to do anything special. No infrastructure changes are required to be able to change that. Seems like things have ended up being hidden. I don't understand that question. I'll have to ask that one offline. How do you enable remote control service auto restart in SP1? You'd have to manually do it at the service level. You'd have to go into the individual services in Windows, go to the recovery tab, and there's an option that says restart. You could, create a batch file or something like that to do it automatically. But if you have a problem child with machines restarting all the time, just open up services. Look for that recovery tab. It says, what do I do on first recovery? It just says restart. Sorry, can you quickly go over the uninstall string? What do you mean change it to X? There is, right here, look really close if you can see it, or look on a machine, your machine. The uninstall string for this one says MSI-exec space / uppercase I, and then a big long string of characters. What you would simply do is take that entire thing, including the MSI-exec, including the big string of characters, copy that entire amount. When you pass the command line parameter of I, it says change. Well, we don't want to change the implementation. We want to remove it. So simply replace I with X. So the uninstall would say MSI-exec space / X, and then that big long string of characters, and that would remove it. All right, so sorry if I missed any other questions. We kind of ran out of time. I'll try and review those afterwards and get any questions out, as well as that one we have outstanding with, do you actually need to install Service Pack 1 first if you want to jump straight to it? We did some research, and one of the engineers says, no, you do not need to jump to Service Pack 1. You can go straight to Service Pack 2. So if you were doing a brand new install, you could go 9.5 and then straight to Service Pack 2. All right, so thanks everyone for attending. If you have a particular training topic coming up, or you need help with an XP migration, we have a lot of people kind of wait to the last minute to get off of XP and need help having LANDesk migrate them off of XP to Windows 7. Let us know. We've been doing quite a bit for other customers. We'd be happy to help. So there's my email address. Please hit me up if you have an idea for the next topic, feedback. Was this good? Was this bad? Please let us know. This is Dave with some closing comments.
Yeah, thanks again, everybody. We ended up with close to a full house. Everybody stayed to the end. Brian, you did a great job, so kudos to you. We'll probably actually send out a quick survey or a poll afterwards, see some things that maybe you'd like to see in the future, maybe make them a little more interactive, add some video, maybe some polls within the webinar itself. We're open to any and all suggestions that you have, but thanks again for joining us, and have a great day.
Thanks, everybody.